Senator Chuck Winder, Majority Leader of the Senate, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me, Betsy.
So, Senator Winder, we know that Senate President Pro Tem Brent Hill is retiring after this session. You're the Majority Leader now. That's the number 2 leadership role. Do you plan to run for Pro Tem if you return next year?
Well, I've told all my colleagues I want to do what they want me to do and would not make any final decision until after the session's over. So I tried to keep people focused and moving in the right direction to get our work done.
Quite a number of senators, including several committee chairs, have announced their retirements this year.
Yeah.
How much is going to change with Senate committees next year, even before we've gone through the election process?
Well, obviously, yeah, I think, the committee chairs that are leaving in transportation, education are examples. There's some great opportunities for our younger members to move up and take over those chairmanships. So you're going to see big changes there. But if you look at, what's happened in, even in the minority leadership with 2, major leaders leaving there, there are going to be significant changes on both parties.
Thus far this session, among the most controversial legislation that's come up have been 3 bills that were debated in the House dealing with transgender Idahoans. And one of those never made it out of committee, but 2 others did clear the full House, headed over to the Senate, and by the time our program is airing, one may have already come up for a hearing. Where do you see the Senate going on these bills, and why do you think the legislature is spending so much time on those issues this year?
Well, I don't know exactly what prompted the House to bring them forward. They have their reasons, and I think it could be local experience or an issue that's going on. I think there's a lot of times reaction that are kind of in advance of other what's going on in other states. So it could be that from, I think, the perspective of the Senate. We're going to try and deal with them. We're going to, look at them. We're going to probably have hearings for them. I would guess there'll probably be some effort to amend them. There may be some effort to totally kill them or not even hear some of them.
What route would you favor?
Well, I always believe in, the openness of the process. So I'm not necessarily opposed to having hearings. I think some of them are controversial enough that they cause significant ire in some circles and significant support in others. And so, sometimes you can get a lot of volatility. It's an election year, so I think people are looking in some cases for kind of litmus tests for who's really a conservative Republican and who's not. And so I think there are lots of things that play into this. But I think, it's safe to say that, we've had the issues of, Title IX and trying to get, more fairness in women's sports and those types of things, and trying to balance that against things that are going on in NCAA and even in our own state athletic associations rules and how to deal with transgender members that may want to participate.
Both bills have been the subject of Attorney General's reviews that have found some really serious problems with constitutionality. Yet we are hearing that there are national groups out there that want Idaho to be a test case, and even that some of these bills didn't originate in Idaho, they're identical to language proposed in other states. Should Idaho be a test case on this kind of an issue for other states?
I think there are some things that we have a constitutional defense fund that we've funded over the years to help us deal with what we think are significant constitutional issues, rights of the states versus the federal government, and maybe there are court cases out there that we feel need to be truly tested. I think as you look at some of these issues, we're talking about, there's some pretty clear law on a lot of it. There are those that would like to challenge, that law and say Idaho's going to be different. We're going to stick to those traditional values and standards, and we just don't want to see our state change. And so I think you've got that, and the others are saying, hey, things are moving on. The world's moving on, and they're are recognized transgender athletes of both sexes and participating. And how do you treat them fairly without causing problems for others? And I think that's one of the issues with some of this is, how do you, if you make an accusation, what do you put that person through, even though it, may not even be, what someone else thinks. And so how is that fair? So you've got to, I think we're looking at trying to figure out a way to balance the fairness of protecting women in sports so that they're not taken advantage of by males or people that might try to take advantage of designating themselves one way or the other.
You mentioned that there's some pretty clear law on some of these issues, and certainly on the birth certificate bill,
Right.
the law is very clear. Idaho is currently under a federal court order
Correct.
to do A, and this bill says, no, we're going to do B. Should we do that?
Well, I think, the way the case came about, and there's some feeling that maybe the Attorney General office, when they were defending the case, conceded too many things, and they didn't really go through the full legal test of those arguments. If you talk to the Attorney General's office, they did, even though they did concede there were things wrong with the law, they did go through complete litigation of it. But
And didn't we
that
end up in
doesn't
the same place where every other state
Right.
is?
And so what I think some people are saying is we still think there's an interest of the state to know what someone's biological birth is, and that's important for the state to know that.
But I guess I'd ask, aside from some are saying this and some are saying that, where do you come down?
Well, I think there are some legitimate issues. I want to try and figure out a way to have a balanced approach at protecting women in sports, particularly at, in the grade school, high school, junior high years. So I think, I'm trying to figure out a balance there without
Okay.
taking away someone's rights. And Idaho and a lot of, high school athletic associations have tried to deal with this. But I think we've got to be real careful how we do it, or we set ourselves up for lawsuits. But I also think it's important to try and put the time in to figure out that balance and protect women in sports.
Let's move on. You are the sponsor of the bill that would require any city that in the last census had more than 100,000 population to elect its city council by geographic district rather than citywide. And currently Boise is the only city that meets that requirement. And currently there are a number of newly elected Boise City Council members who live in the same part of town. Under your bill, they'd all be one-termers. The legislature would have decided that. You're a former candidate for mayor of Boise. Why are you bringing this?
Well, I think, first of all, I want to correct one thing. It's not the previous, it says the current. We're actually in the process now of having a census. So the cities have until 2021 before this would even impact them. So the census will be done. There'll be 3 cities. It'll be Boise, Meridian, and Nampa that will be under this. The idea is, and I can give you an example in my own neighborhood, I live out just about as far out in West Boise as you can get in the Bristol Heights area. And our neighborhood has been fighting for 3 years with the city and developers on a piece of property that was part of the original subdivision that we're in. And the zoning was changed, the densities were changed, and yet the neighborhood couldn't even get the planning and zoning or city council to close off a pedestrian access to keep people from parking in the residential neighborhood from the apartments and the storage. So it's just one of those things that you go back to annexation, the history of annexation. Boise forces annexation. 2,600 acres supposedly in the last few years. So it's
So was
trying to
that
give.
the same concern that got you to run for mayor of Boise?
Was that the concern at the time? No, I just wanted to see Boise advance. I thought, there was great opportunity to take the next steps, improve our downtown, try and do some of the things, make it a business-friendly community. And so that was my intention at that time. Today, I think what I'm trying to say, and I think you'll find out there, there's lots of people that are saying, we don't live in the North End, we don't live in downtown Boise, and we don't feel represented. We feel disenfranchised, and we don't have anyone that we can go to that's from our area of town and have someone here and listen to us. And so we're proposing districts.
So making this call at the state level rather than letting each city decide it, as current law has it, is consistent with a trend in our legislature of overriding local authority on certain issues, such as the legislature's bill that they passed to ban bans on plastic bags or local minimum wage increases. Why is this the way the legislature is moving with regard to local authority?
Well, I think, right now there's absolutely no reason for the Boise Council, even though they've had the law in place since 1984. Think about the growth that's occurred since that time period. Think about how far our boundaries of the city have expanded, and yet nothing's been done. So what the city now has an opportunity to do between now and the next election time and between now and the next session is actually do what Mayor McLean said she wanted to do if I would just not do anything now, and that is go out to the public, find out what they want, figure out how to put together a good districting plan, and bring it back to the legislature and say, this is what our community would like to do. She has the time to do that. We're not, forcing this down their throat to say this is the only way it can be, but we're going to get them to the table and let the community decide.
So this year, the approach in the Senate and the approach in the House to the issue of administrative rules, and actually last year really, was very different and caused a lot of friction. At the beginning of this year's session, we heard there was going to be a compromise. There's been no compromise. Where does this stand, and what are the differences between the Senate and the House on this issue at this point?
Well, it was a very difficult issue last year because of the requirement that was really not part of the constitutional amendment, that it was be passed by a bill. What we called our going home bill, where you basically put all the rules in and said they're going to advance till July of the following calendar year. That blew up because the House wouldn't pass it. The Senate passed it, we didn't. So all the rules that had previously been extended go away, and so that's why we had all the things that we did this year to deal with. We think we have a way forward where we can actually take all the bills or all the rules, put them into one concurrent resolution. That are the ones we agree on for ag, for ed, for all the different committees, rev and tax. Bring them all. It'd take about 12 to do that, and we agree on probably 98% of everything. You just get those out of the way and pass them and move on, and that's in conformance with the constitutional amendment because it doesn't allow the governor to veto those resolutions.
Is this something you're going to try to do this year? So in other words,
Yeah,
instead of one drop-dead bill, there would be
Right.
12?
There would be resolutions that are not subject to veto, because that's what the Constitution now says, and those would be passed, concurrent resolutions, by both bodies. Then the ones that we don't agree on is where we still had the fight from last year. We think there's a way forward. We're going to try and finalize that. We're in the kind of the final stages of negotiation because we've only got, we're down to what now, 11 and a half weekdays left till we're supposed to be out of here on the 20th. So we've got to make some things happen, very quickly, but we think we're in pretty good agreement. We think we've talked to the governor. We've been talking with the leadership in the House. We think we're pretty close. We're going to go to our caucus tomorrow and talk about what our concept and plan is. Hopefully they're going to be supportive. Then we can, go to the House and say, hey, here's what we can do. And I think, I really think we're this close to having it agreed to.
So you said the 20th is when we're supposed to
That's
be
our
out of
target.
here. Final question, will we be?
Well, we're certainly going to try, and I don't know whether you've been watching what we've been trying to do, but we've been trying to get our calendars cleared up, and because we know there are going to be certain things that we deal with, the tougher bills at the end of session, and they take more time in committee and on the floor, and so we're trying to get our calendar really shortened up so we can make that date. And we're really more bound up by the fact that once JFAC completes setting the budgets, which should be tomorrow, that it takes about 2 weeks of just processing to get those bills, appropriation bills, through both bodies and passed. So that's our restraint. Other than that, we could shut everything down and be gone. But we do have to go home with a balanced budget.
Senator Winder, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Betsy.